Welcome to a fireside chat with Dr. Janice. The fireside is where we meet each Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. It is where we have those conversations. It's where we learn and it's where we grow. Take a minute and hit the subscribe button so that you will be the first to hear all the episodes that we have on a Tuesday. Now, let's get into tonight's episode. The power of the mind is what we will be talking about. We know that the mind is indeed powerful. So let's hear from our guest.
All right. All right, Mrs. Gordon. So the first question go over to you. When we're speaking about the power of the mind, what are we really talking about? If you were to tell our audience about this power of the mind, what would you tell them?
Good evening, everyone. When we talk about the power of the mind, first of all, we've got to understand what the mind is, because the mind is used interchangeably so many times. Sometimes people talk about the mind and they mean the brain. They talk about the mind and they mean the heart. When we talk about the mind in this context, we are mainly talking about the cognitive role of the brain. Yes, the cognitive role of the brain that has to do with cognition, behavior, emotions, perception, that kind of a thing. So that basically is the mind that we're talking about. When we talk about brain, we're talking about that physiological organ that is housed in the skull. It does, our mind has a lot to do with our brain, or that is the seat of it from a physiological point of view. However, research has also proven that the heart, when people talk about their gut feelings, both the heart and the gastrointestinal system also has a direct impact on what we combine to call the mind. So overall, when we talk about the mind, we are looking at that part of us that controls our thinking, our behavior, our emotions, and our perceptions. And so power of the mind is what potential does this cognition, this understanding, this emotion, this behavior, this perception, what power does it have? And I want to proffer this evening that the mind is extremely powerful. When you talk, for example, of psychosomatic responses, that is the ability of the mind to affect what is happening in the body. And I know everybody out there understands when you're in love, what's going on in your mind and your heart start fluttering and your face start blushing. That's the power of the mind. And so that's psychosomatic. But even outside of that, we want to look on the fact that we can control success. We can impact destruction. We can impact growth by the mind. So much research, so many books written about how powerful, how influential, how impactful the mind is to who we are and our world.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I tell you, we have just started and we are going very deep already. The thinking, the behavior, the perceptions, and all of those terms, the cognition, the emotions, all centered around the mind. Dr. Marcia, what would you add to that if I were to ask you the same question?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Again, I really love to listen to Patrice. I don't know if I would want to add anything apart from And sometimes we want to look at the mind as something very simple. But I want to talk about the mind just a little from a pillar as a Christian. I believe that the mind is our guardian angel on earth. However, if you do not embrace the abilities of this guardian angel, it can work against you. So the mind in itself, in my mind, is the powerhouse of our destiny. The battle between good and evil is the mind. It goes on in the mind. And even our eternal destiny will rest on the decision that we make, and that decision comes from the mind. So as I set that foundation, I want to say, what is the mind itself? You cannot touch your mind. You can touch your brain. It is physical, you can see it. But that superpower that was placed in the brain cells, the complex neurons and the complex nerves and gels and the things that make up the mind, makes it such a delicate powerhouse that if your mind is damaged, your life is likely to be damaged, because you are not able to make conscious decisions. You are not able to walk. You are not able to move. You are not able to speak. You are not able to do anything. Science says you become a vegetable. So your body and your system is great, but it cannot function without the mind. The mind, to me, has the final word. And so that is why the Bible says we must guard the avenues of our mind, because out of that mind can come good or evil. And so our actions, our emotions, and our thoughts, and our feelings, our desire starts in the mind. And so the power of the mind becomes so monumental when you have lost your mind. When someone gets mentally ill or has all of those issues that make you not be in your right mind, then you find that anybody can do you anything and you yourself don't even know. What am I saying? The mind, God says, is so important that you must allow that little thing that you cannot touch, that is so powerful, that unseen force that dictates how our lives are ordered, must be controlled by God. You must have the mind of Christ. That's what he says. And you must have this mind, because to have this mind means that your life, you have chosen life, you have not chosen it. That is how I see the mind and the power of the mind.
Powerful thought from both of these ladies. And as I listened, I am thinking that this mind power, and I'm going to pose this question to Mrs. Gordon. This mind power, since it is so power can't be powerful, but since this mind power is so deep, it contains so much. Is this something that we were born with, or can we develop that power of the mind over time? Is it a developed force, or is it something that we were born with?
As I mentioned before, mind is used interchangeably with heart. It's used interchangeably with brain. And the mind, the major functions of the mind, if we were to connect it to a physiological position, would lie heavily in the brain. And we are born with that. So we have the ability to think. We have the ability. A child who is born has emotion. The child can respond. The child can make decisions at birth, right? At least before birth, but this is what we are aware of when a child is born. So the child is born with a mind. Child is born with a mind. However, a mind is also cultivated. And so it takes us into the question of nature or nurture. What I have in my mind, is this something I was born with? Or is this something that develops, as you said? It is both genetic and environmental. Genetic and biological refers to, the nature. That is, we were born with this. Therefore, your mind will have certain predispositions. You will think a certain way. You will behave a certain way. There are things that are coded at the DNA level. You just have to look in your family and realize that even as children, before there is a lot of environmental factors, you can see similarities in thought processes and behaviors in individuals. So the mind is nature. However, the mind is also nurture. It's cultivated because you are in an environment where you are forever taking in stimuli, and you will put different things together to mean different things. So, for example, the mind of someone in one culture is going to be different from the mind of someone in a different culture. One culture will be free to look in the other person's eye, to look deeply in their eye, and to express themselves. And their mind is comfortable. They are expressing how they are feeling with their eyes. Put them in another setting where they learned that looking in the eyes of someone is disrespectful. Then the feelings conjured from the same action is different. So environmental factors, culture, and all of that have a lot to do with the power of the mind. Also, recognize that we are not just looking on the mind, but we're looking on the power of the mind. A child who is grown or reared in an environment where their thought process is respected and critical thinking is encouraged, where they are exposed to a wide cross-section of information and alternatives, that child is going to think and behave differently from one who is in a more controlled and fixed setting. Born with the same brain, have the same physiological functions, but because of their environment, their minds were nurtured differently, and so they behave differently. I've looked on two different individuals, but even the same individual put in a different environment can behave differently, can achieve more, can be more successful or less successful. They can be more fearful. All of these impact the mind. And therefore, I want to categorically state that genetics, education, experiences, culture, all of those things come together to give me or define how powerful my mind is. It is a combination of nature and nurture.
That was indeed what we're talking about here, the power of the mind. It is a combination of nurture and nature. And I told you that we were going to be going deep in this room tonight. We're talking with Mrs. Patrice Williams Gordon and Dr. Marcia Thomas Powell. And these ladies are really splitting apart the power of the mind. And Dr. Marcia, earlier you talked about the renewing of the mind. So I want to go a little deeper with that. And I want to ask you, what are some of the major challenges that people will face when they decide to renew their minds?
If we talk about the renewing of the mind, it means that our minds would have gone outside of what our desires or intentions would have been. It can also be that the mindsets and the cultural habits that we may have developed from nature and also from nurturing, because we get it from both, as Patrice says, and from genes, and we are predisposed to think a certain way, and those predispositions develop and become certain set mindsets because of how we are cultured and because of the way we see with certainty that these types of mindsets work for our parents or father or mother, our relatives. And so to renew the mindset, it means that we have to unlearn some of the things that we have learned. We have to relearn some of those things, and we have to learn new things. That's one. The second thing is that the challenges of this relearning and this unlearning, it's not easy. If something works for me, but it is not good for me, I don't think it is easy for us to let go of certain things. And the Bible has, sorry to be mentioned in the Bible all the time, but the Bible does say that there are some things that we really can do, but they are not expedient. They are not advantageous to us. They don't benefit us in any way. So they are lawful things, but they do not benefit us. But a lot of times we are very comfortable with where we are and who we are. And so it is not easy for us to let go of certain things and to get a mindset. So say, for example, someone might be in a relationship and is not working. There are certain needs and demands that must be met, and the partner does it, but the partner is an abuser. The partner holds you at ransom. The partner speaks to you condescendingly. The partner sometimes even gets physically abusive, but that mindset holds you and traps you to say, if I leave this relationship, I am going to be at a great disadvantage. And so I am trapped by the state of my mind because I am not prepared to change that mindset and adjust myself and take the risk that I'm able to be who I want to be and maintain myself. And so comfort zone and fear and doubt are some of the things that prevent us from renewing our mind. Okay, there are some persons who don't know that something can be better or that there's another alternative. So lack of knowledge can make you stay where you are in your mind. This is good enough. So there are some persons who are in a job, for example, and they are getting paid their bills. It is making them pay their bills, but that's not their purpose. They are not being fulfilled, but they are so content that there is nothing better than this. This is good as good as it gets. And so they remain there when if they just went through that door, they would find that it is multiplied. So even our comfort in relation to self-doubt and the limitations that